I see you at the dining table, and it was like God slapped me upside the head and was like, look at your wife. Everyone's doing their own thing, and you were just all by yourself. Like, what are we doing? Like, how have we got to this place?
Yeah.
Honestly, I just felt so convicted. This has to stop. Like, something has to change here.
And then you have to go counsel someone's marriage. That even that first year we got there was couples that needed help, and you're like,
I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know about. I'm trying to figure out my marriage, much less
you're like twice our
help
age,
you
and we're
with.
like,
Here's a book. All right, welcome to the Don't Drink the Kool-Aid podcast. We are excited to bring another episode for you this week. We've had quite a few comments and people message us specifically about marriage, and we wanted to kind of get together and share a little bit of our story, because our story is very much like a marriage miracle story, in the sense of like what God did for us and how in a lot of ways that played into us also leaving the Potter's house. And I think what I've seen from a lot of people who've messaged us and left comments is this is a common theme for a lot of people who have also left, is they were either having marriage issues or struggling in marriage, and that played into their frustrations either with the church or with God or with the Potter's house or any of those things. And so they found some encouragement in some of the things that we were saying. So we just kind of wanted to share our story, and a lot of this is, kind of personal. And so, we're being a bit vulnerable with this, but I think it's important to be vulnerable and to share and to be open about what God did for us. I think, I know for me personally, I would be very hesitant to share a lot of this stuff just with random people on the internet.
Yeah.
But I think it's important, because I feel like there are going to be people who resonate with our story.
Yeah.
And can be helped and can find like grace and hope for their own marriages and their own families based off of what, we have been through. So, So it'd be good to share.
Yeah.
So like I said, we are going to get a little bit vulnerable here, and some of this stuff is kind of personal, but I think it'll be beneficial. And so we hope that, if this helps you, we'd love to hear from you. We appreciate all the comments and everything that's already been coming in, and the people who've been following us. It's really been just mind-blowing how much God has been using this podcast to reach people and help people. So let's get into our story. I think would be good to share maybe first off is a little bit about like our personal history. You and I come from very different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. And so when we got married, we brought very different perspectives into that relationship.
Yeah.
I was a church kid, missionary kid. I'd grown up in the fellowship all my life, very well traveled, lived all over the world, experienced all these adventures as a kid, and moved back to Prescott. And the whole time, I think for me, kind of the pursuit of ministry and pastoring was sort of on the forefront of my mind. My dad was a pastor. Mm-hmm. And so I'd always felt like, in some way I was called to preach, and God had given me, these gifts to preach, and, felt comfortable talking to people and in music and all those things. And so you just kind of grow up with this like, like this must be what I'm going to do, and this must be my calling. But you grew up very differently. You were in a smaller town in the Midwest, and just a very different perspective. So maybe kind of share a little bit about like, how you grew up, as opposed to, I think I've shared, my experience, but mm-hmm. I don't know that we've heard that much about yours. So
yeah, I hadn't traveled hardly at all. No, I grew up in the Midwest in a small town. Didn't grow up in church like you did. I'd gone to church a few times with my grandma or whatever, but different upbringing in that way, completely opposite of you. And I got saved. I was 19 when I got saved. Had my daughter at that point. I guess to kind of my personality, as far as my personality went too, I was always the type that was quiet, easygoing, but stuffed a lot of my issues and problems or anything I was feeling. Like I didn't know how to communicate my feelings at all. In that way, I brought that into marriage. But yeah, as far as growing up, I didn't grow up in church, so I did have a very limited experience with church. I did go to church a little bit. I would go out to Arizona, come out to Arizona I did several summers. I came out to Arizona to visit my aunt and uncle. So we would go to church for about a month during that time to the Prescott Church.
Yeah.
So that's how, we kind of connected.
And we should say your uncle was an evangelist in the Prescott Church. Yeah. And that's ultimately how you and I met, was through your family in Prescott. Because I was living in Prescott. You were never even like on the radar for me, except for the fact that like at the time, my friend, you were his cousin. And so you came to visit, and that's how we met. Yeah. But yeah, you're very different.
Did I say
very different perspective as far as like,
I didn't, you told me you wanted to preach, when I met you, shortly after or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Like I had no idea what I was getting into. Yeah. I mean, I kind of had a vague idea, but not like you did. But yeah, it was just, I was like, okay, that's cool. Just go with the flow. But yeah, that's, I guess, leading up to, I moved to Prescott and I was 21. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I already had my daughter at that point, and she was 2.5 when we got married. And then,
so how'd we met in a bowling alley?
Yeah.
You came to Prescott to visit your family. Yeah. There was a big group of youth, young people. We all went out to the bowling alley, and you came with your cousin, and that's how you and I first met. Was seeing each other across the bowling
across
alley.
the way. Yeah.
And and yeah, it was love at first sight, right? Was it for you? Because it was for me. I don't know. Was I the only one there?
I was definitely attracted.
So
I was a little nervous because I already had a daughter, and I was like,
yeah. Well, and when we met, I don't think like dating with anyone was on your radar.
It wasn't. Yeah, I didn't come out there at all like thinking I want to meet someone. I had already gone through a little traumatic,
traumatic relationship.
Just the relationship I was in, breaking up, and then I got saved, and I was just like in a place where I just wanted to serve God and kind of give it.
You were a teen mom. I mean, you had your first child at 18, and it was just kind of like a lot of craziness happened in your life before you met me. So,
and I knew I needed some time, but yeah, I didn't go into that even thinking about a relationship. So I was like, I was nervous, but it all worked out.
You were nervous when you met me, or
no? Just nervous of liking anybody else in general. Oh. Just that thought of like, especially because
you had been warned too. Like,
I'd been warned.
Remember when you came to Prescott, you like the girls in your church in Illinois were like, "Don't find some guy."
Or they didn't want. They didn't want me to move away.
Yeah.
But I did think. Just the idea of, because I lived in Illinois and you were here, and I'm like, I don't hardly, just dating long distance even was making me nervous. Just, there was a lot of factors, and I was just,
Yeah. So we hung out like for the week or two you were in town.
Yeah.
And then before you left, I got your phone number. And we started talking on the phone, just got to know each other a little better. And then ultimately I came out to visit you a few months later in Illinois. And we just really we just kind of knew pretty early on that, we wanted to be with each other for the long term. And so that summer, we met in like February, and then in the summer,
you came to visit in Illinois in May, sometime in May.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Arizona.
You moved to Arizona in July.
Yeah, it was like the last day of June or something. It
Yeah.
was right before conference, so it was like a yeah.
And then you lived in Prescott with your aunt, and we eventually got engaged, and then we got married in that October. So we met in February, we got married that October.
Yeah.
I think it's helpful for people maybe who don't go to the Potter's House to understand a little bit of like what dating looks like in the Potter's House. And I only say this because I feel like this contributes to sometimes the way that marriage can go in the Potter's House. I think I will say from my personal experience, I think it did contribute to our marriage and like how you and I got to know each other, because you know, they're very strict about dating. You know, there's always a chaperone. And I think there's like good things about that. You know, I don't think you should be dating when you're young and you're just constantly alone and you never have anybody around. And, you know, that could be a recipe for disaster for, you know, hormonal teenagers. But I think some of the problem with the strictness of the dating life is you never have time one-on-one to really like get to know each other. Like there was always distractions around us when it came to like, so, and then there's this pressure at the Potter's House. Like if you want to be in ministry, then you just need to get married. Mm-hmm. And so you have this, like, you have all these couples, you have all these young people, and they're just, they want to get involved because they're being pushed in the fellowship. Like if you want to fulfill your destiny, you need to become a pastor. And if you want to become a pastor, you need to get married. So you're just like looking to get married and like get on with.
And they were just like, kind of like, well, if you know, like why wait to get married? If you just know you want to be with that person, then you should just get married so you don't screw up and do something you shouldn't be doing, you know?
Yeah.
So the kind of thought there too is like, you know, the giving it time to kind of get to know each other or just enjoying that process of dating and engagement and whatever was a little like pushed to the side.
Yeah.
Because
or even just like really figuring out, is this the person that I can spend my life with?
Yeah.
You know, like that's such an important decision.
And luckily, like we had a good connection, and we did, you know, love each other, but I feel like it would have benefited us a lot to just take time from, you know, I don't feel like our dating life was a dating life, really. We had a hard time. You know, I was living with my aunt, and, you know, it was looked down on to go out on a date by yourself. And, you know, it was just like,
how many times did we go out by ourselves in our time dating?
I could probably count on one hand, like maybe
we were
a
engaged.
couple fingers.
Yeah. And we maybe went out on it. Like we maybe went out by ourselves like once or twice.
Yeah. Cause we talked on the phone a lot before I moved there, and then really got to know each other that way. But I feel like it was definitely a whirlwind once I moved there. Yeah. I wish that we would have, you know, been able to just like go hang out and go on a date, a normal date, and not feel like
talk without people around and like just get to know each other. Yeah. Like it could be a public setting, you know, like a restaurant or.
But it was like back then it was just like very strict about you need to have a chaperone with you at all times. And it's like they didn't trust you to even have that discernment with yourselves of like, you know, just going on a date and not your friends are spies, really. Like you don't really know. That's the thing about being in a very legalistic kind of high control setting like that is you are at all times being like worried about like, who's going to tell on me for something, even though you're not guilty of anything? Yeah. What it looks like and what their restrictions are inside that church are going to be, you know, you could get some repercussion from that from the pastor, even though you're not doing anything wrong. It looks like to them that you're, you know, not obeying the rules, every little rule they have. And, you know, you're just always on guard, I guess.
And I just point this out because I think it's good to mention that we had a very rushed dating process, and I think a lot of people do in the Potter's House.
I think so.
Like they rush into marriage. And
it's not an uncommon thing to hear somebody that got married in less than 6 months of knowing each other. Or ours
hear
was
that
like
all
8
the time.
months, I think. But
in fact, if someone's dating for like a year, that's a long time.
Yeah, you're like, wow, you guys have a long.
Yeah. You're like,
when are you going to get married?
Know?
When are you going to get married? Everybody.
If you know, why are you waiting? And so, yeah, there's no patience when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And just like they rush people into ministry, they rush people into marriage. And I don't know that that's always healthy. Mm-hmm. I think there's a balance to it for sure. But so anyway, we survived the dating process, and then we got married. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, we the moment we got married, we had a family unit because you already had Sierra. Mm-hmm. So I became an instant father. And again, we're not really, we're married, but we're there's like factors, right, that are keeping us from, you and me, from really like having time to, I think, bond and really get to know each other well. Because it wasn't even just that. It's that the moment we're married, we're involved in ministry. Like I was in bands. The church in and of itself, you're always doing something all the time. You're constantly busy.
We were really busy back then.
Very busy. Yeah.
I remember it was just a nonstop all the time.
We're newly married. We have a family. We're very involved. So we're very busy. And I think there was a lot of distractions that we're dealing with. The early pressure of pastoring, that added like stress kind of, you're trying to...
We went on staff to be the, what do you call it back then? Concert director,
like a youth pastor essentially.
Style. We went on staff. We were married 9 months when we went on staff. Yeah. And then we were on staff for a year and then got sent out to preach. So that was the timeline.
Yes.
So 9 months being married before you're taking on a load like that was a lot. Yeah. And we didn't realize how it was going to affect us. But it did in a really big way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So early on, we just didn't have enough. It would have been way healthier for us to be able to process just like learning to be married, having instant family, and for you getting, our whole, just getting used to that, getting used to that, and just the dynamic of being in a different place in life at that time. And we just didn't have that time to kind of like sit back and enjoy that time or like learn from it, or, it was just, I just felt it was really rushed. So we were married 9 months, and then we were in the ministry, and it was go from there. Because when you're in ministry, on staff there, it's like you're constantly busy, and you are,
and there's a lot of stress
expected. Too. You were really stressed. Mm-hmm. You had a lot of, and it in turn, it stressed me out, and we were all just like, that whole year was interesting.
Yeah. It was crazy. And I would just say, if there's anyone who is listening to this and you're in the Potter's house, like, don't take our word for it. Like, be patient when it comes to ministry. I think you have to, I think you have to understand like your own, what is a good pace for you as far as like your relationship and feeling comfortable and feeling close and feeling mature enough to handle a lot of those things. Like, I think for you and me, doors were opened very quickly. And I think a lot of it had to do with my sort of background in the church, because I had grown up as a missionary pastor's kid. So in a lot of sense, Greg had already known me. Mm-hmm. So there was sort of a lot of expectation for me to like get into ministry. I was, very involved in ministries already. So, when you're one of those disciples who's involved in everything, you're kind of already like...
You had preached one altar call at one of the music scenes before they asked you. And we didn't really get... That was, I mean, you may have talked about that already in another podcast episode, but like,
but talk about it from your perspective. The moment we were asked to go on staff, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, just the pressure of that, because we were young, and I guess back then you think your pastor knows something you don't. You think they have the mind of God on it. They probably, maybe they are seeing something I don't see. So you're trusting your pastor, but I felt like looking back, I would have said no. Mm-hmm. Just
we weren't ready.
We weren't ready at all.
And I don't think it was not on our radar either. No. Like, we thought we would have plenty of time to like we didn't even settle in, but we got asked so quickly after we were married that it was a huge surprise to us.
Yeah.
And then when we tried to say, well, can we think about it or pray about it? Like,
it was a no. It was like it was like, if you know, then why would you need to go home and talk about it if you know? And he's like staring at us sitting there. I still remember it because it was such a big deal. I can still see his face like sitting there, and I look over at you and you got deer in the headlights like I do, and we're sitting there looking at each other like, and I'm like, well, I mean, I don't know, you wanted to preach, so if you want to do this, that's up to you. Like, but in the meantime, I wish we would have said no, we're going to think about it, or just said no in general, like just knowing ourselves and knowing what we needed. But it's hard when you're 21. You feel that like that that culture that we were in was like, you felt like maybe you were going to miss out on. Maybe.
Well, you feel when a door opens, and especially it's your pastor who's your kind of spiritual father and authority. They're telling you like, you're this, this is something you should do. You're called, like, here's an opportunity for you. You feel the pressure to accept that,
And you said that up until that point, you had a decent relationship with Greg.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, as soon as I remember you saying that, as soon as you went on staff, your whole relationship with him like shifted to this business, business relationship. And it was totally different after that. So before that, I think it is good to say like, you did have a normal relationship with him up until that point. Yeah. And so you did trust him in a sense.
Big time. Of course. Yeah. He was like a huge inspiration for me, because he was like the ultimate pastor's kid, right? He's Wayman's son, so we had known him from South Africa, and we were very friendly, and just, I got along with him really good and had some good conversations with him. And then, when I went on staff, it was weird. Like, there was definitely a shift, because I turned into like his employee. And then it was like, I don't know, I just saw a very different side of him. But
anyway, so that was, I guess, just to say the experience and the pressure of like going into the ministry that young. Yeah, we didn't have to, but we just kind of felt we trusted him, and we didn't really know what we were getting into either, because we were just so young and naive at that point. I feel like, so it's hard to, to judge in that moment.
So we did jump into ministry. We said yes. We went on staff. We were on staff for a year. We got sent out to pastor. We moved to Las Vegas, Nevada. And, we pastored there for 6 years, we had 2 more kids. We had already had Nathan, our oldest son, when we were on staff in Prescott, and then had 2 more kids in Vegas. So we had 4 kids total.
Nathan was 4 months old when we went to Vegas, and then we had 2 more while we were there.
Yep. And so I think back on those 6 years and it's just like a whirlwind.
Yeah.
Like I will readily admit I was not mature enough to handle what we went through in Vegas. Yeah. I was not mature enough to handle pastoring, and I really had no business being there. And I'd be the first one to admit it. I made dumb mistakes. I did a lot of stupid things because I was just not mature enough to handle it, you know? And so I think it's important to point out, like, the things that you deal with in ministry. I don't know that a lot of people who haven't done it can really appreciate the stresses that are put on you in it. I think if you've been a pastor, you probably know a lot of those things, but you're dealing with the stress on your own marriage. So you and me we're trying to, still get closer and like get to know each other. We're basically newlyweds. We're having kids.
And then you have to go, counsel someone's marriage that,
we're
instantly
like
dealing with marriage problems. Even that first year we got there was couples that needed help, and you're like,
I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know I'm trying to figure out my marriage, much less
they're like twice our
help
age,
you
and we're
with,
like,
here's a book.
Which it's just, that's a whole nother story, but.
Yeah. So, I mean, counseling other people's marriages, and other people's problems. And I think for me, I just remember feeling even more stress about the people in our church's problems than I did about my own. Like,
because that's the forefront of your ministry.
Yeah, you care and you love these people. And then you get a phone call and someone's like, I quit the ministry, I'm leaving the church. And I just remember you know, those times were the most stressful times, and I cared more about those people's problems than my own problems,
Yeah.
you know, and that also isn't good for us, right?
Yeah.
Because
our marriage, that whole season in our life, our marriage took the back burner.
yes.
Unfortunately.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely a hard time for me too, because I had all these little kids.
Yeah.
And it was hard. It was really hard. And so
Yeah.
it was
Money was stressful.
money was tight. We had to move every single year we lived there, which was stressful. On top of that, you had to switch jobs because we had gone back and forth from, when we first went, we were on support from the main church from Prescott, and then they wean you off of it pretty quickly. You had to get a job. Then you finally get that was a struggle. And then you finally get a stable job, and then they want to put you back on support. So you had to quit that job.
Well, getting a job is hard because you have to find a job that you can do while pastoring. Mm-hmm. So it's like a second job. Yeah. So you're looking for a second job that can support your family, but also doesn't take away from the time that you have to give to the church, which is a huge amount of time. So it's very, very tricky. And I know during the time we were in Vegas, I mean, I probably worked, 10 different jobs, in the 6 years. It was so many different jobs. You're always like,
you had a night job at one time.
I had a night job. It was, it was a lot of stress, and personal finances was a struggle, and I know, obviously, and we'll talk about that, but we left Vegas, in debt and worse financially than we had when we had gone there. Yeah.
There was, I do. There's a couple of good things that, from, I do really love some of the people that were, the people that were in the church there and stuff. And, but that's the one thing that I took away from Vegas. The rest of it was a struggle. Yes. It was a big struggle.
Yeah. And I know for me, again, working a second job and then your main job as a pastor, you're trying to come up with 3 sermons a week, a Sunday school, come up with outreach ideas and all kinds of things. And so there's that pressure of, leadership. My leadership, they wanted to see results. They want to see you be fruitful. Yeah. They want to see the church grow. They want to, you're trying to get yourself to a point where the church can support you. So you're stressed about the church's finances, and paying the church bills. So there's just a massive sort of, amount of pressure that's on you. And I think,
and just not going, a lot of that was, we didn't go out with any sort of, they don't train you to take care of, the church's finances are it's like running a business, kind of in a way. And you're trying to get on top of that, but when we went out, they don't give you any, guidance on how to run church. Yeah. You give you a book and they're here you go and have fun with that. And so you really don't have any
everything in the Potter's house is a book.
Yeah.
Any kind of counseling you go to, it's here's a book. You need to know how to run a church and have financial, here's a book.
But and part of that is, so anyway, it was just, I think there was just a lot we didn't know, and you were so young trying to, go out, and to me, it's we would have benefited a lot from having experience in our marriage, having experience with our just life in general before we ever tried to go out and preach. So that was the struggle.
Yeah. And I would say that is a common problem. And I think, again, I felt like I was ready for ministry. I had been commissioned by my pastor. I had all the experience of my childhood watching my parents pastor. So I was under no illusion that we were going to go and it was going to be easy. I wasn't carnal or lukewarm. I was doing more praying, more Bible reading, more seeking God than I ever had in my life in those 6 years. And I think the problem comes when there are men who are leaders, who carry authority, who have spiritual weight, who in a lot of ways you look at as your spiritual father, and they're giving young, immature men like me, 21-year-old guy, they're giving you a title, they're giving you power, authority, they're placing people's spiritual lives in your hands. And it's very easy, I think, when you're that age to go to be kind of prideful, honestly, in a lot of ways. I look back and I think I was very prideful. It's very prideful just to think that you're going to be able to go and, wield the power of God and chop down the enemy, you know, as you go. And it's like, and that's kind of, you're pumped up to do that, you know, that mindset. And if you think about it, you have to be very prideful to think that that's a recipe for success as a church. Like, we're going to take these young guys who have no experience, who, you know, I had worked 2 jobs my whole life, and then turn them into pastors and put them over people. Like, there's a pride just in that aspect of it, of them thinking that that's a useful or a wise way to use young people in the church, you know, without really giving them any sort of formal training. You know, the most training you get is to just be on staff and watch what's going on in the Prescott Church. And that has, the Prescott Church is a well-oiled machine. So there's really not a lot that you're taking from that you're using, you know, in a small church setting, pastoring like a pioneer church or a young church. It's so different. Yeah. Yeah. So I just think, you know, it's hard when you haven't really fought any battles spiritually, or you haven't really worked out the battles in your own marriage, you know, to go out and to do that and to pastor and to lead other people. And the barrier for entry, you know, to pastor is so low. I think what it means is there's a lot of men who are in the Potter's house who are pastoring that really have no business being there, you know, and I think that's a huge problem, you know. I mean, you know, I'm a huge military buff. I love, you know, listening to a good Audible book or reading. You know, I like to consume a lot of military stuff, you know, whatever I can get my hands on if it's good. And so one of the things that you know about the military is the best military units are the hardest ones to get into. You know, there's a big difference in skill if you're like in the conventional army or if you're in like a special forces group, right? So to become a Navy SEAL or a Green Beret or a Ranger or Delta Force, all those things, you're going to go through the most difficult training in the world. And that's why they are so elite, because it's so hard to do it. The Potter's house wants to call themselves like the spiritual elite, but it's like, the reality is you guys make it so easy for people to do it. Like, the qualifications to become a pastor in the Potter's house is the equivalent of a mall cop compared to a Navy SEAL, you know? So you can't call yourself elite when you don't make people, you know, go through anything to do it. You know, I said this on an earlier podcast, but Jesus was with his disciples every day for 3 years before he felt they were ready to go into ministry. Yeah. And those men already had a huge amount of religious training just based off of the culture that they were raised in. They knew the Bible better than anyone. Yeah. Anyone in our modern day culture, they'd memorized most of it.
Yet they still needed that one-on-one working through all their human issues with people, because that's what Jesus cared about, was how they interacted with people and how they cared about one another. So even within those 12 disciples, they were learning how to work with each other, people from completely different backgrounds, and how to love one another and care about each other, and
and love the people who they were ministering to. And God and Jesus was, you're absolutely right. He was so focused on how you deal with people and how you minister to people. That was the focus of it, you know.
And I think in the Prescott Church, what I noticed was, you know, we were there for 20 something years, and it's like, you see how easy it was for somebody, if they really wanted to go on staff and get sent out to preach, they could put on a show for the pastor, because the pastor was not going around asking their employer, you know, how is this person on the job? He wasn't asking people that he worked with in ministry, how is this person? He's not, you know, trying to figure out their character like it does say in the Bible to do. There's character standards that men need to meet biblically, that the Bible lines out, and the Prescott Church didn't know how to do that. They didn't, that you could put on a show for the pastor and they're like, oh, this person is amazing, let's put him on staff. And it's like, if you would have asked anybody that had like worked with this person, or, you know, in other facets of life been around this person, you would have gotten a different story. But because this person could, you know, suck up to the pastor or look good in certain ways. You can dress up for church and you can act like you're one thing, but it's a totally different scene when you're around other people in life. And that was what was sorely lacking in the church, as far as like, choosing people to go on staff.
Yes. Yep. And if you read the biblical kind of description of what a man who is qualified to be in ministry is, it is all based off their character. Mm-hmm. It's all based off of their reputation, among people. It talks about in 1 Timothy 3, it says the people who are qualified as overseers and deacons. It is a trustworthy statement. If any man aspires to the office of an overseer, it is a fine work he desires to do. An overseer then must be above reproach. That's a big one for me. Above reproach. The husband of one wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, skillful in teaching, not overindulging in wine, not a bully, but gentle, not contentious, free from the love of money. He must be one who manages his own household well, keeping his children under control with all dignity. But if a man does not know how to manage his own household, how will he then take care of the church of God? And not a new convert, so that he will not become conceited and fall into condemnation incurred by the devil. He must have a good reputation with those outside the church, so that he will not fall into the disgrace and the snare of the devil. I mean, so I feel like the Bible lays it out very,
Yeah.
And there's just no way when they rush people into ministry like they do that you can go through that qualification list and really know, And that's not to say, you're going to be perfect. There's going to be people you can't suss them out. You can't, you don't know everything that's going on in their heart. But I just think, it's a good practice to be patient with disciples as opposed to just kind of rush them into ministry, because we experience that.
And some of that stuff doesn't come out in a person until they've had a little bit of life experience. How are you supposed to know some of that stuff about somebody when they're 20 years old,
right?
19, 21, they haven't had time to prove some of that to people, I don't think, or to.
Right.
So anyway.
Basically, after 6 years, we were done.
Yeah.
We didn't kind of get the church to the point where it needed to go as far as like taking it to the next level. So ultimately, the pastors and Pastor Greg decided to bring us back, and they call it Redirection, to come back into the Prescott Church and get refreshed. And by that time, I was ready. I was so done. Like, I was ready to leave and never do it again. We had stressed. Such a bad experience there. Overall, I just remember when we were driving out of the city, like looking at the city in the rearview mirror and telling you, like, I'll never do that again. I'm just not going to do it again.
There were so many aspects of that too that had just weighed on you for so long. I think you were just really, you were struggling. I was struggling. Yes.
It wasn't healthy for us in so many ways. Like I feel like we left the ministry in a lot of ways broken. We left hurting. I know for me, I felt like a failure. We were in debt. The stress and the pressure and all those things that we had dealt with, they just didn't help our marriage. Like, they hurt our marriage in a lot of ways. So it's just funny because, you leave the ministry, and in some ways we were so much more broken than when we had started.
Oh yeah.
And then we have to go back to Prescott, and it's like we have to start all over again. Yeah. Except now we've got this baggage from ministry that we're carrying with us.
Yeah. And imagine that, because they just want you to get refreshed and go back out. And you had even, one of the evangelists or something I still remember them telling you, don't shelf it.
Yeah, they were like, God still has a plan for you.
You got a couple words about that probably.
I remember thinking, I don't know if I agree
with that. And you're
like,
ugh. But it was one of those things that it's a pressure. It's a pressure to go back out. It's a pressure. Once you've gone out, everybody's looking at you like, when are you going to go back out? When are you going to go back out? Yeah. But there was a lot to heal from, and,
I think when when we left, I knew in my heart I just wasn't ever ready for that moment.
Yeah,
and I think in a lot of ways I realized as we left, like, look, if I'm ever going to go out into ministry again, God would really have to show me that's what he wants me to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I felt like I got into it based off of like other people's sort of like prodding, even though, I mean, I'm not blaming it on other people. I definitely felt, I felt called because that's sort of the push of the fellowship. But I just remember feeling like I didn't stand up for myself in a lot of ways, you know, and there were things I should have said that I didn't say, and ways I should have stood up for myself that I didn't, and things that I would have done differently if I had been more kind of assertive. And when we left, I was just like, you know what, I'm never going to do this again unless God makes it really clear to me this is what he wants for my life.
Which is smart.
Yeah, which I should have done the first time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we go back to Prescott. We're starting back at square one, but we're starting over really like I didn't bring any skills like for the workforce in Prescott from that time, you know. I had worked random, like 10 different random jobs, you know, just trying to, you know, keep food on the table while my main job was pastoring. So none of those jobs were like these like high skill jobs. It was like pest control and different things, you know, landscaping. I did all kinds of stuff, delivered magazines and gas stations at one point for Old Dominion.
So many random little things.
So many random
Vegas
jobs.
had a lot of little stuff you could do to scrape by.
And so anyway, we come back to Prescott, we're starting over. And then I would say for the next 10, 11 years in Prescott, you know, we kind of were up and down, just like in our marriage. I think we were living the suburban life at that point, as far as like, you know, travel sports, band recitals.
Once we got on our feet a little bit.
Church ministry.
Yeah, we started to... You know, the kids were getting a little older, so we started putting them in sports. And you always had a band going on. Yeah,
music, ministry at church. We stayed very involved in the church all this time.
Yeah.
And I think that contributed again to the distractions in our marriage. So my point in saying that is, for the next 10 years, like our marriage, we left in a lot of ways broken, and the stress and the pressure of ministry hadn't gotten us closer at all. In many ways, probably even further apart. And then the next 10 years, we're just busy. We've got so many distractions with the kids are getting older, and we're busier, and we're taxi drivers, you know.
It's easy to fill your time too when you don't, like for both of us, we were both, you know, I would stuff things, was afraid to say things, or different ways, you know, to communicate. I had never really learned that skill very well, as far as like speaking up when something bothered me or whatever. You were the same way, where you didn't want to talk about your problems or be vulnerable in any way. And so it was a bad mix of trying to fix things. So you know, the smart thing, I think something helpful that they could do, for people that do, you know, there's a lot of things, but to have come back from that, and like, you know, somebody to see that people, when they're out preaching and they come back into the church, like there's a lot of, if they're wanting you to get refreshed, it's not just sitting there and listening to sermons. Like, you should really be hands-on with these people, trying to help them in some way, in my opinion, like to offer some kind of, but it's just, there's so many things that are little things that could be, that are just so broken in that way. But I think that, it was just hard. That would
require them to really genuinely care for the people.
Yeah.
You know, which I think is part of the problem.
And not just sending you back out.
And I would say we loved each other all that time, but we would go through difficult stretches. You know, I think we would go through seasons where things were very hard, and we felt like we were just roommates.
And we didn't know how to work, because we didn't know how to work through the issues that we were having. It was a struggle, because we were both...
We've avoided conflict.
We avoided conflict, and then we were trying to fix things where... I don't know. There was a lot of...
We would let things build up until they blew up. Like, we would just like... we would be annoyed with each other for a while, and it would like just build up, and then we'd finally have a big argument about it, you know?
And then at that point, you're having, with any marriage, you're having that resentment build up. So the argument really isn't just about that, what just happened, maybe a little bit, but it's also got all this baggage behind it, you know?
Yes.
So it's the defenses come up, you know? So anyway, we just didn't know how to work through marriage issues back then. Didn't have any direction for that.
Yeah.
We weren't going to.
We talked about counseling. We thought about it, like going to our pastors, and we had counseled for some issues. We were open about that at the time, and God, I think, helped us in ways. And that's where we would see this like up and down thing happen for us, you know, where God would help us. But I think just looking at it in general, being very like looking at things in a general sense, we just were kind of struggling. And we thought about, okay, well, let's do some counseling just in general for our marriage. But I know I had talked to people who had been through counseling, and it was so generic. And most of the time they were given a book, and it didn't really help them, and they didn't really feel like they had any breakthrough. And so we just, and I would say too, that counseling is just not the strong point of the Potter's House. Like that's not a thing that they focus on, you know, it's not their ministry. So that's why I kind of give it that like 10 to 11 year timeline, because we came back in 2012, and then we really kind of had that breaking point moment in our marriage in like 2023, right at the beginning of the year. And I know for me, most of this was me, because I had been struggling a lot with calling all that time, like the time that we were back, because there's this push in the church that, you know, if you really want to be used, then you need to be pastoring, you know, and they can say all day long that they wouldn't
word it like that.
No, they love and support even just the pillars in the church, but there's always a push. Every conference, it's always like, you know, the most important thing you can do, the most valuable thing you can do is go out and preach. And, you know,
and they say, you know, they do say, obviously, like, you know, they'll say like, you know, the pillars in the church are important and these things. And they do try to say things like that over the pulpit, but at the same time, I don't know, I know it wasn't just you that struggled with what you were struggling with, and that thought that it is pushed, because I do think a lot of the culture in the Potter's House, because of the culture that surrounds it and the push, and that's the whole drive of the whole fellowship, is to go out, you know, make disciples, get those disciples to go out. We want to just multiply. We want to multiply. And so that is a huge part of the Prescott culture and the Potter's House in general, the fellowship culture. To get men to rise up and go out and just keep going with that, you know.
And they can say whatever they want, but let me just say this from my perspective. And I know I'm not alone in this. Like you said, I know of many other guys who felt the same way I did. And that is just this struggle with your calling. If I'm not called to preach, then what is my purpose? And you really, in a lot of ways, feel purposeless. Because the mentality is like, God has called us all to preach. Like, you know, this is, you know, and so many of the guys in the church had gone out and had pastored, or, you know, it's just the push. It's just what the Potter's House pushes. And so you feel in a lot of ways like you're not as valuable. You feel like you're not a part of like what God's doing if you're not preaching. There's sort of this separation between like the disciples, like the serious men, you know, the preacher, the guys who want to go out and preach, and then everybody else, you know, they're kind of, you know, you just feel like you're on JV versus varsity, right? And so I think that for me was a big struggle, and I began to struggle personally just with meaning and purpose in life, with my salvation. Like I was questioning my faith. I was questioning God, questioning the church. I just remember having like a full-blown like crisis of faith. And I remember voicing things like that to you, and at times talking to you about like the questions I had about God and the Bible and even the church. And I'm sure that stuff started to kind of freak you out. And I know during that time period, you were pretty worried about me and what I was going through.
Yeah, I think it was mostly because I just felt like you were in a really dark place, and it was, I didn't know how to help you, and that was the scary part, I guess, as a wife, like I was watching you go through that, but you were, in some ways it was your attitude with everything was in a negative light. And I understand it now, but at that time it was very hard to to process for me, because I knew some of what you were saying was right, but at the same time I felt like you were struggling. Sometimes I didn't even know that even if you did leave the church, like, would you even go to where you were at with God mentally, like what that would look like if we both just took off and left. There's just a lot going through your head during those times, and it was just
I was in a bad place. Like there was a point where I thought I was going to leave the church, where I thought I might leave the faith, where I thought we might be divorced. Like all those thoughts had been playing out in my head. And I think the sad thing is, I was really in a lot of ways, like kind of searching for answers, and I wasn't getting them at the Potter's house,
so we're just spinning our wheels trying to
you're not getting fed any kind of like meat there. You're getting fed like the same 5 portions of baby food every week. You're hearing the same 5 sermons, and again, this is from my perspective, just like my experience. I just was struggling big time with everything, with all those things. And I know you felt that as well, obviously. Yeah.
I mean, because our marriage during that time too it was still struggling as far as, it was just a kind of roller coaster situation of, it wasn't smooth sailing. So we were having a hard time with just to figure out, like, we needed direction and, some light on that. So I would say just didn't.
Yeah. Just to kind of put it into perspective, we came back from ministry in 2012. Okay. And then by the time we get to it was a slow build for me. I was good. I was fine, and would go through up and downs, but really by 2023 was at that point where I had just gotten so worn down over time and not found any answers or help that I was just like ready to be done with all of it. Something needed to change. Yeah. Yeah. And I got to a place at that point where I was just like kind of escaping, I was like,
kind of like you were checked out a lot. I was checked
out. Yeah.
You'd get home from work and it was just like something to fill the entertainment or of some sort. And you're just like you're just kind of, would do what we needed to do, but you were checked out as far as emotionally, almost like really struggling with just life.
Yeah. I remember, so for me, the breakthrough came one specific night. I remember I was like in the garage, which was sort of my little man cave thing. And the boys are old enough to where they're, the boys are teenagers. And so we would get on, we would play video games sometimes together or whatever, like just, and that was fun. I wish I could get back on video games with the boys. They don't want to play with me anymore though. But, at that time, like, I don't even think I was playing with them at that time, but I just remember coming out of the garage.
Yeah.
It's, I walk out of the garage and I see you sitting at the dining table all by yourself. The kids are, again, teenagers. They're all older. They're all like self-sufficient. The boys are in their room doing their thing. Kenzie's in her room doing her thing. Sierra was out of the house at this point. She was living on her own.
She was about to get married.
She was engaged. Yeah. And I come out of the garage, like just, after playing video games for however long, couple hours. And I see you at the dining table and it was like God, like just hit me upside the head. Like that's the only way I can describe it. 'Cause it's not that I heard like an audible voice, but I just felt like this, like it was like God slapped me upside the head and was like, look at your wife. Mm-hmm. Like, everyone's doing their own thing and you were just all by yourself. And it kind of like hit me that, man, look at what are we doing? Like, how have we got to this place?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, where we're all just in our own places, in our own world. And I'm off doing my thing. The kids are doing their thing, and you're just alone by yourself. And I felt so convicted. I just felt so convicted. And something in me was just like, this has to stop. Like, something has to change here. And the only way I can describe that is it was genuinely a God moment. Like, God just really broke in on my heart. And I didn't know like exactly what to do, but I just felt such a huge impression to do something. And so I just remember like cleaning the dishes. That's what it was. Like loading the dishwasher, you know. And for you were like, what on earth is going on here? Something's happened. I don't know. You could tell me from your perspective, but because I knew how far we had like kind of gotten apart from each other, that I couldn't just be like, hey, let's change things. Let's
you didn't tell me immediately.
I didn't say anything to you at first.
You just started doing things for me, which is huge because one of my love languages is like acts of service. So like for me, and to preface that, like you had really gotten into almost like a selfish mode because you internally you were just struggling, but really it was like you were checking everybody else out, which included me. So everything was like, you know, that our marriage wasn't flowing in that way. So it was like a hard, we were fine one day and the next day we're arguing and, you know, back and forth. So it was a little bit, so anyway, it was really noticeable whenever that shifted in you. And you didn't tell me immediately, but you started, like, it was like a few days, I think, later. But like the first things I started noticing where you were like going out of your way to help me clean the kitchen or do things for me. And I was just like, what in the world? And just the way you were talking to me, just the different, I could tell something had shifted. Something was different and going on with you. And I was just like, okay. So I think it wasn't too long. And you started, I don't know how, but you started opening up. We started having conversations in the morning. At that time, it was a really slow season. You were,
for
your
our
landscape business was
slow,
real slow. So there was a lot of mornings where you would be home during the winter. We would have like hours long conversations sitting at the dinner table, you know, with our coffee in the morning, just like opening up about all kinds of stuff.
It was like God did a miracle in our marriage, and it was like we were newlyweds again, or we were dating again. It was the craziest. I still look back on that and just like it's such a miracle to me.
Yeah, we couldn't have done that on our own.
The only way to explain it is literally God broke in, and it was, for me, it was like a salvation experience. Because what's funny is it wasn't like I prayed a sinner's prayer and got saved or something.
No.
It was like God convicted me about you. And then you and me began to repair things. And in a lot of ways, that was just us beginning to open up. And we had conversations. And we talked about things that we had never talked about in our marriage for, you know, the years that we had been married to that point. We had never had some of the deep conversations that were very meaningful that we had in that time.
And it healed a lot of things. It healed a lot. It healed everything. Really, it was like such a shift and a turnaround for us. And just being able to like really do a deep dive into all of that I remember we just prefaced it with like, you know, we're not going to be defensive. We're going to open up and just really, and it was like a
all cards on the table.
Genuinely were ready to like, let's open this up and just be honest and vulnerable with each other and like work through it as a team.
Yeah.
And
there were things,
we weren't trying to fight against each other. We were trying to like, even though there were hurts and we still had some really, the next couple months were really interesting. Just trying to work through those deeper issues, but it was so good. It was really good.
And I remember there were things about your past that I just never wanted to get into because it would like make me uncomfortable and like, you know, it would bring on like, you know, just kind of in some ways, I guess, anger, or jealousy or whatever it might be. I don't know. But there were things that I just didn't want to hear about, you know, and it was like, I remember in that time, it was just like, I just want to know everything. Like, just tell me about what you have been through.
And
I want to
like,
hear.
Are you sure about this?
Yeah. I was like, I want to hear about like the stuff you have been through. I just want to know, I just wanted to know as much as I could about you in that period. And it was crazy what God did in our marriage and how God changed. He did a miracle for us. And I think what's cool about that is it was like, that was for me a first step, because God did that miracle in our marriage. And then for me, it was like God opened my eyes to kind of my own, like it was like I genuinely saw a miracle, and I had a renewed faith in God out of that, out of us.
And I think it is so important though, too. I think God really, really cares about how you treat your wife and vice versa, of course, but like, because of the position of like the man and the just as like a, you're to love her like Christ loves the church, like, and that's a high calling, like that's a high. So I think he kind of like it just seemed like he gave you such a revelation on like, like this is, your marriage is very, very important. And we were willing to like start working things through and working it out. And everything just shifted from there. It was like a huge miracle for us.
It was, yeah. Yeah, it was really cool. And it really was a breakthrough moment for us that God has been able to carry through. I mean, our relationship is like 100 times better today than it was, after we had been married for 10, 15 years. And, now we're in year 21, and it's just like God has like he's just helped us so much. And it's crazy to think, that was in 2023. So we're 3 years away from that. And it just cool to see how God has sustained that in our lives. And the reason why we bring this whole thing up is because that was a catalyst too for everything that he's done in our lives, I think, as well, as far as even leaving the church and where we're at now. Which is so interesting to me, how it was literally God came in, did like a miracle in our marriage, and out of that a miracle like in kind of the way that we started to see things and open our eyes to what we were putting up with, and began to get you and me on the same page about what we were seeing in the church.
Because we were seeing things, but we were also seeing it from different. I mean, you were obviously like seeing it in a different way because you were pastoring and you were doing all these things, and I think we had experienced a lot of the same things with the pastors in the church, and there was a lot of things even in the church that were happening, that we were like, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why are they treating them like this? And just things that's really off that you're not okay with, but it just builds up and builds up. And finally we were like, because of that, our marriage was, had been healed and helped. And so, God really helped us. We were able to start really getting on the same page with all of it. And the communication was on a different level at that point because we were actually being able to communicate without, all the baggage that we had brought. So it was like we had worked through everything and we were really being able to communicate really well.
Yeah.
And
we were talking about our feelings.
Feel help, like we could talk to the other person without being like judged or defensive, or we had worked through everything. So it was like that was a safe place to be like, this is how I feel about this, what do you think? And
because the contrast to that is before that, I had said things to you, because I, in some ways, because I had pastored, had seen things from a different angle. Like I had worked directly with some of the leadership. And so there were things that just bothered me, and I would mention those things to you. And I think before God did a miracle in our marriage, you had a hard time trusting some of the stuff that I would point out and just be like, I don't understand this, and this doesn't make sense to me, and I don't like that. And so
some of it was like, I guess I felt like sometimes you're just being super negative about things, but also even if I could see some truth in it. And you were, but even if I could see some truth in it, it was really hard for me to, it was like, I felt like I didn't know where you were at as far as
Spiritually
and everything. And so I was like trying to figure out like, what angle is this coming from? Or is it coming from a healthy place, or is it coming from just, I don't know. I was so confused about what was happening. So for me, when I like, clam up inside and not know what to do, it's like, I don't want to move. So for me, like spiritually, I was just like, for me to like my marriage to be fairly unstable and then leave the church at the same time was really hard. It was really hard to connect the dots there. So I was like, I was struggling in that way. You were struggling, with your stuff.
But I think it's also important to point out that a lot of the issues you were seeing, it wasn't like I had to convince you of things, I think.
No, because once we were in that healthy place with us, it was like we were discussing it in like a healthy way. We were like, yeah, we both feel this way about this. And you're like, so, and then you started really researching things, but we were definitely on the same page as far as like, yeah, this is wrong and this is wrong. And why is this happening the way, starting to question things and actually verbalizing it more and really discussing like, what do we do with all of this? Because we don't agree with all of it. Where do we go with it? What do we do? We don't want to sit with this and just ignore it and, justify it for, whatever reason. So
I think for the first time in our marriage, we were willing to ask the difficult questions and we weren't afraid of the answers.
Yeah.
And I think beforehand we had never been like that. I didn't want to deal with things. I didn't want to deal with like hard things, and so God really kind of began to help us. And I know for me, I started to really dive in to the stuff that bothered me and started to research things and started to look into doctrines and other churches and hear outside voices and read books and listen to guys like N.T. Wright and Tim Mackey, John Mark Comer, Wes Huff, Sam Storms, like all these different people who have a different perspective than us and just get a balance to like a balanced
view of like Christianity in general and diving into the Bible and backing that up with, what are these people saying, and does it line up with the Bible? And that makes some of it's like so logical that you're like, okay, that would really make sense. And this is probably why I haven't agreed with the way the Potter's House has been doing this or that the whole time, and everything just started piecing together and coming together for us. Yep.
So God drew us closer. He really started to unify our viewpoint of things and got us both on the same page where we were just like lockstep together. Like, hey, this is what we believe and this is what we disagree with. And ultimately we're open to like whatever God wants for our lives. But we don't think that this is the place for us. And we just really did feel God like drawing us out.
You did try to give the benefit of the doubt to the church, the pastors, trying to, at that point, because you were like in a better place mentally, you were trying to work through things, and you were actually like, you were seeing all these things, but you were seeing them from a very a good place mentally and a healthy place. And so it was all coming together, even though we were, big, like you said, like it was coming together in a way that we were like, it all led up to, we really need to do something about this. And we think that, you had a couple conversations. These things weren't being dealt with the pastors, with, ultimately
what's crazy to
like
me looking
they're not
back,
going to change anything, and we don't agree with these things, so there's no in between, and we're not going to be in unity any longer. And they want you to be in unity. If you're if you were in that church, you have to think like they do and do things like they do, and we were not willing to do that anymore.
And I think it really in a lot of ways was just God, because
it was God.
There were things that we didn't agree with and that we were struggling with, and then it was like they started to double down on all of those things to the point where it was like unavoidable to bring it up. And and so it really came to a head, not because we were pushing it, but it was like God just brought it all to a head.
That was the cool part. Was I've said this before, but like everything that we went through that whole season like once we really figured out this is what we're believing and why we're believing it, and we worked through all that stuff, it was like God was just like slowly helping us out the door.
Yep.
And we really like started putting the puzzle pieces together, and it was so clear. Like none of that was confusing to me because I knew in my heart what we were doing and why we were doing it. And it was like God was, it was just such a peace over the whole situation, even though it was hard and it was a really hard season in our life. I'll never forget how much peace God gave me through that whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you can be in the middle of it was like being in the middle of just the hurricane, and you're just in your little peaceful bubble. Like, like I knew it was hard, and there's obviously like it's not easy to do because we knew we were going to lose friends and go through things that were, and it's, you know, leaving that whole culture and leaving people behind in those ways. But I knew it was the right thing to do for our family.
Yes.
And I knew it was what I wanted to do for my kids, and I was doing it because God had helped us through all of that. He helped us through our move. He helped us through all of it. And it was very, very apparent.
Yep.
And it was peaceful to me in a way that I guess in my heart, it was peaceful.
Yeah.
Even though it was hard, it was still peaceful as far as we're doing the right thing.
Right.
You know?
And I think it's important to point out because, you know, I've heard people say like, well, you should have been more patient, or you should have given the church time, or, you know, you could have stayed and like influenced it from the inside and stuff like that. And I think for us, it was so evident that it was God's timing for us.
It was definitely God's timing.
And I think that's where people get it wrong, in the sense of like, oh, well, you just have to listen to whatever your pastor says, or this is where you're safe, so this is where you're meant to be. And the reality is Jesus is who we, you know, he's the one that we are called to serve and to be conformed to. And God ultimately has a bigger plan that's bigger than like a church or the fellowship or Greg or any of them. Like God is ultimately who we serve. And we were at a place where we had given all of the time. We were patient. We had let God do his work. And ultimately we both have seen this and can marvel at it, because the reality is it was God who brought that timing for our family. You know, it wasn't something we forced or pushed or tried to do. Like it wasn't on our radar to even leave when we did leave. Like we had thought, you know, at some point we don't want to be here. We kind of
knew we were wanting to leave.
Yeah.
But the timing that did happen was kind of a shock to us because of the way it happened.
Right.
So again, it was one of those things where we felt like it was like God was just like, all right, guys, you can get out now. Yeah. Like it was like everything was just being I guess confirmed in our life.
Yes.
Like I said, it was just a piece about everything, and you could see God's hand in all of it.
Yep.
And even when we left, we didn't, you know, we started looking for a different church, and I just remember sitting through those first services, just tears, tears coming down, because it was just God was just so
refreshing,
evident, and my soul felt at peace, and like I just had this huge burden lifted off of me, and you remember that feeling probably. I mean, we were both like, I think that you were just as emotional about like just that feeling of God. It was just amazing. You know, it was like we got through it, you know. We got through the hard stuff, and not that we won't ever have hard things happen again, but it was like that was the biggest thing in our whole life that we, you know, had to do. And it's like every time I think about it, I just think, thank God, like you can see his hand in the whole thing, and just how much we have grown spiritually, and just in our marriage even too, but like just being out of that, and like going to a healthy church and growing with a healthy church family and people that aren't constantly judging you for things and have this like really legalistic way of viewing everything. It's a healthy, peaceful way to serve God. And that is something that I'd always craved, but you don't know any different when you've never gone to another church. You don't know any different. You don't know it could be that way. And it's just such a miracle.
It is.
The whole thing is a miracle.
And it's just cool how you and me were really on the same page. And I feel like God really helped me and you in the sense that there was a confidence in the fact that we were so unified. And it's interesting because this was really kind of reinforced for me. I recently started going to one of these, to one of the men's group meetings at our church. There's multiple of them. And so you kind of find a group that, fits your time frame that you can go and stuff. So I started going, and the last one was so good because, one of the guys was talking about this very thing and how he was saying that God speaks to you through your spouse in a lot of ways. Like your spouse is a conduit that God uses to speak, and that sometimes he can tell you yes, sometimes he can tell you no, sometimes he can tell you wait, but he will oftentimes use your marriage relationship as a way of confirming and helping speak to you as a couple. Because there's things that as a couple, when God really clarifies things between the two of you and you're both on the same page, it's so confirming. And I just thought that was powerful, hearing it from another guy, how he's like, yeah, God speaks to me through my wife. Because, when we're both on the same page, it's like there's a confidence that this is God, and so I thought that was good because I felt that in our experience. Like I really felt like this is God helping us because we're both in agreement with this and we're both on the same page. And it was the hardest thing we've had to do. And yet God just brought us through all that. And I feel like in a sense, it was the hardest decision because of all of the consequences that we knew we were going to face by doing it. And at the same time, it was like the most smooth and easy thing that we've ever done. God just opened doors and we just stepped through them, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And so that's why, cool. I would encourage people, a lot of this got brought up because of some of the messages that we got from people. Yeah. And I just really wanted to encourage people who are listening, if this is something that you're struggling with, God is so good. And if you, if you allow him to, he will help you. I think you have to be open-minded and you have to be able to connect with your husband or your wife, your spouse, and get on the same page. Because I've heard a couple people who have said my spouse isn't sure about this, or, they have family in the church, they don't want to leave. And I totally understand that. I get where you're coming from because that's hard and that's a difficult place to be in. And you do need to be on the same page. Like you can't just one person be like, I'm out, and the other person is not on the same page. Because we were like that in some sense, and for a while, where I was like in a different place. You
wanted to leave so bad that, and I wasn't there yet, as far like we weren't there yet. And
so that's where I had to be patient and wait. And honestly, I don't think I was being patient because I was ready to leave, but God did a miracle in my heart. Yeah. And out of that, he did give me another whole level of patience, because that happened in 23 and we didn't leave for 2 years late, for 2 more years. Mm-hmm. And I just remember after that happened, really giving all of it to God and saying, look, I don't know what you want out of this. I don't know if you want us to leave. I don't know if you want us to stay, but whatever you want, God, we'll submit to you. Mm-hmm. and I'll leave this in your hands. And that's why I think that God's timing finally happened. And I think there may be people out there who they're struggling with the same thing. And I think you have to make sure that you and your spouse are together, and then be patient and let God show you his timing. That doesn't mean don't speak up or don't, I think if you're on the same page, then it's perfectly fine to go and ask a question or get some clarification, or if you both are on the same page to leave, then leave. Go. There are so many amazing churches out there. But you definitely need to be together on it, Yeah,
I think one of the things that helped me a lot in that time frame was just you bringing up things you had been studying too, because you can feel like something's off, but for me it was I would see things that were wrong or whatever, and but really I started listening to the things that you were reading or bringing up, and then comparing them to the Bible. And we started having Bible studies and really digging into why this is not biblical compared to this is, and when it all started coming together in that light, for me, it was very, like, we don't need to be in this situation. This is a spiritually abusive situation, and I don't want to live my life like this any longer, and I don't want to raise my kids in this any longer, because I don't want to continue that cycle. I want to break that cycle. I want it to be different for them, and I don't want them to think that this is normal. Because it's not, and it's not biblical. And so for all those things, like, coming together for me was really important.
Well, that's a really good
to compare them, because I think it's important for, to work on your marriage, because that's where, no matter where you're going, you're going to be with your spouse, and it's such an important relationship for that reason. And I think, and I'm not saying, like, everybody has different situations, and I'm not saying that's across the board as, like, you're not speaking for everybody's individual situation, but I do think that was a very healthy way that we went about it. Was, we just saw such a huge miracle in what happened and how it happened. Was, we really worked on our marriage, and I started just not, I was listening to marriage podcasts and trying to, like, get some kind of help, because I knew it wasn't coming from the church. And it was like, so it was just a sacrifice. I'm just really, like, not focusing on the daily problems, but really, like, what do I want out of this long term, and just trying to be there for you in a healthy way. And you were trying to, you were working on that as well. And, like, we were trying to just really connect, and serve each other in that way. And then we're really able to heal and get on the same page. And we just felt like such a team on that. And then being able to study and read through the Bible, and, like, why? Because I had to really disconnect, what they were saying over the pulpit in some ways compared to what they did, because their actions and their words don't line up a lot of times. And that was huge for me, because I felt like I was just taking everything. There was a lot of things that I saw that were wrong, but there was also things that they would say that I really started noticing during the sermons and things. And I'm like, they don't do that. They are saying that, but they don't do it. And they don't do this. And things just started really sticking out to me big time.
Yeah, and it's hard to see things from a different perspective when you don't, like biblical doctrines or different things.
When you're not studying and researching. And so that was such a huge thing for us.
Yeah.
And when we were, not only are you studying and really digging for yourself, you have to do that, because if you're not, and you're just taking everything that they're saying as truth, and you're being taught the Bible from their perspective and not your own research and your own perspective of, like, this is what the Bible actually says, and why doesn't this scripture, we're doing this, and this scripture says to not do it, and we're doing, and there's so much that you just really have to, like, work out your own salvation, like the Bible says. You work out your own salvation, and then it really starts to come together. And when we got really serious about that is when we really started seeing God's hand in it, and he worked it out. He worked all of it out.
Yeah, I think the Bible study component is really important, because we began to get together and really kind of go through a lot of those things that we were struggling with, and look at it from a biblical perspective and talk about it
in a very honest way. Of, like, just,
it's amazing when you read the Bible in context.
I know, right?
What happens. Take someone else's interpretation of it.
Exactly.
You just read the Bible for what it's actually saying.
Yep.
So that's huge. And then I just wanted to share this, because we got a really cool message from someone that just reached out, and they mentioned this, and their experience was also a marriage one. And so I think this experience kind of was something that triggered my thought of, like, we should share our story. But let me read their story real quick. It's really good. They said, "Great new podcast. 2 things really resonated with me and my husband. First is that false prophecy is extremely dangerous. When this person's son was diagnosed with a condition, they were told he would have chronic illness for his entire life. He was extremely, extremely sick. But some people from the church came and prophesied over us when he was in the ICU and said that God was judging us. It was so tormenting. After seeking counsel with Pastor Greg, we were, of course, told that that was not from God. But like you said, Pastor told us not to tell anyone about the prophecy. And he wanted us to keep it hidden, and that those words were spoken. He wanted us to keep it hidden, that those words were spoken over us. The other thing that happened a few years later was a church service where a pastor declared our son to be healed via a "thus saith the Lord" prophecy. But in actuality, their son had become more sick, and his biopsy results were worse than ever, and we were looking at bone marrow transplants as an option. I was tormented, and I stopped praying and reading my Bible for years. I had to go to work full-time with 2 young boys, had to drop out of ministry in order to pay our medical bills. I was in spiritual crisis over it, and I became suicidal. And that is the result of false prophecy. Why would a loving God declare my son healed, but he not get healed? It took a long time for my heart to heal and for me to understand healing and hurt. Years later, I was spiritually starving and started listening to sermons outside the fellowship. I heard a sermon about how every time Jesus healed someone, it was to bring a sinner to salvation. That was the point of his healing ministry, not to give Christians a pain-free life. It was very clarifying. That same day, I decided to start reading my Bible again. I read John 16:33. I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. That set me free. I started listening to weekly sermons from this church in Texas, and each time we went to the church in Prescott, I was more sure of our need to leave. God did a miracle in my heart and showed me his supreme sovereignty when my heart was broken and bitter and under horrible leadership and preaching. It sounds so similar to our experience. Mm-hmm. God in his mercy found a way to heal my heart. I really feel God led us from there. Simultaneously, our marriage was a disaster, and we went to marriage counseling for years with Pastor Greg. Every single session, he would harp on my husband about how he was running from the will of God and he needed to become a disciple, etc., etc. It was as if Pastor Greg thought becoming a disciple would be the Band-Aid for life. But that's not my husband. He never wanted that for his life. He just wanted to serve God. We were both completely broken about our son and reacting to God and each other very badly. But somehow leading an outreach and preaching at the music scene was going to fix that? ? We found a marriage ministry at the church that I had been listening to sermons from. This was the church in Texas. And unlike the Potter's House, there was a huge ministry in the church to help marriages, so we decided to go for it. But the craziest thing happened when we told Pastor Greg about moving. He knew how broken we were. He knew the state of our marriage. And when we told him we were going to do this one last ditch effort to save our marriage and just try this marriage ministry for 1 year, he put his hands on my shoulders, pushed me away from my husband, and he looked me in the eyes and said, "When your marriage fails, I want you to know you can always come home." So ultimately, he didn't want to help me. It was just as if he wanted our marriage to fail because my husband refused to sign up for his pyramid scheme. That was the moment I knew we had to get out. I'm happy to say we live in Texas, have done the marriage ministry here, and God has done an amazing thing. He has healed my heart and our marriage. He has helped our children, and her son's health is thriving. So thank you for speaking about this. My heart is that we truly want to see people reconcile with God. There's a lot of broken people there. We're a small sample of the deep brokenness, and we know how empty the preaching is there. We know that the end goal isn't to help hurting people. It's what can people do for the organization, not what can the church do for broken people in it. And that's sad. So we know God can help people. We're in prayer for the people we love, and we pray God in his sovereign way brings them out and heals hearts. Sorry for the long message, but we haven't shared this with anyone, not even our family. But I feel we can share this now because of what you guys are doing. So such a good testimony.
It's such a good testimony.
And we really appreciate you sharing that with us. And we hope that helps other people along with our story, that people can kind of take some encouragement from it. And again, if you're experiencing something similar, feel free to reach out. We're totally open to, giving, helping you, or just whether that's sharing any advice that we have. I definitely want to do we're going to do a podcast here pretty soon, if not the next one, about how to find a good church. I think that's a big one. But yeah, there are resources out there for help. And I would just really encourage people. I think one of the funny things is that the church is so deathly afraid of people going to get counseling. But I think in a lot of ways, counseling is really important and helpful for people.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I actually have another comment that I'll read here because this person reached out and said, during my time at the Potter's House, professional counseling was actively discouraged and often dismissed as psychobabble. While working at a local health clinic that offered low-cost counseling, I encountered several women from the church who sought services in secret, fearing disciplinary action from the pastors if their attendance was discovered.
It's sad. It's sad that you have to sneak and feel like you're like gonna be, that your church wouldn't be okay with you going outside of the fellowship to like.
Yeah.
That isolation right there is why it feels like a cult. Like people, they wonder why. Well, that's why. Like that's one example of why. And it's such a harmful way of viewing things. Like you're harming your people in your church. You're harming them by not allowing them like to view all other Christians outside of your organization as like a lesser than or not helpful or not part of God's church. They want to make it like a lower, like not helpful, not it's just sad. It's super sad that you would have to feel like you're doing something wrong but so desperate at the same time to seek outside counseling because you're not being helped within your own church and your own church family. Yeah. And it's super harmful. That's just one aspect of the spiritual abuse that that happens in that church. Yeah. And in the fellowship. It's just a sad thing to watch so many of our friends or peers that were our age. A lot of them are divorced. A lot of them are no longer in the fellowship, but divorced. And some of them, just different avenues how that has happened. But it's so detrimental. That when you're not getting a healthy marriage counseling or a healthy marriage, just the perspective of, like, I think we talked before this about how the culture of the church, you don't feel comfortable just going to another person and asking for help, just opening up about your struggles, because that's something that we've experienced since we've been out. Is how refreshing it is to be around other people in the church that it's just a culture of like, you don't feel like anyone's judging you. You don't feel like they're looking at you like, oh my gosh, you have that problem, or, like it's so healthy. It's just so refreshing. It's hard to explain until you experience it, but it's just so healthy to be in that atmosphere of people and friends that you have around you, a small group of people that you can really trust and that you can open up about your struggles with, and they're going to actually care enough to help you, whether it's a marriage issue or just life in general. You're able to confide in these people, and or go, if you want to go get marriage counseling somewhere. That's a healthy thing to do. Yep.
It blows me away how vulnerable people are here.
And you don't have that experience when you're in the Potter's House. We didn't have that experience.
Yep. You were afraid to be vulnerable because you didn't want to get labeled, or you didn't want people to go and like tattle on you. And then, there in the Potter's House, you get labeled and that's, who you are,
I guess. And it's just, it's really hard to explain to somebody that hasn't experienced it, just how the culture kind of shapes and forms your views on those things, and how protective you feel and like guarded you feel just because of that culture.
Yep.
And then to come out of that and experience the other side of it is just total night and day experience. And so it's, that's definitely one of the things that I would encourage is, go get marriage counseling. Go, don't worry that you're not doing anything wrong by going to get marriage counseling. You're not doing anything wrong by getting an outside perspective on things. It's healthy. It's a healthy way of viewing life. And
and God is good. Like, if you're struggling, like God is, he's much bigger than any of your problems. And, sometimes you got to cry out to God and get help. Sometimes there's things like you said that you need to go talk to someone, a professional, someone who can give you some guidance or help you.
Both of those things in connection is going to help you if you're genuine. Like God is, and God is faithful to help you through it. And it's that the body of believers that are in a healthy way going to help you through those things. And people that do have, some experience in those, like like a Christian counselor, marriage counselor, it can be very helpful. So yeah, anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll wrap it up there. But yeah, like I said, if there's things that we're happy to help or give any advice or point you in the best direction we could think of, as far as, if you have any questions you want to reach out. We appreciate all the comments, all the subscribers, the likes, all those things are really helpful. And we want to get this message out there so that the most people can hear it and be helped by it, be encouraged, hopefully find some, get closer to God ultimately is the goal. So we appreciate all of you, and we hope that our story helps you. And is there anything else you can think of? I think we covered it all pretty extensively.
That's it.
All right. Till next time.
All right.